We're going to call the Boston Town Council meeting back into order. We had an executive session prior to this meeting. Just want to publicly note that no votes were taken during executive session. And I also wanted to note that I have an email from the Secretary of State's open meeting website indicating that this meeting was filed on their website on March 31st at 5:50 p.m. So we are in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. This evening, the only thing on the agenda is a public hearing for the budget, the fiscal year 2015-2016 budget. There are copies up there on the table if anyone wants to grab a copy to read along as we go forward. I will open the public hearing and we will discuss each department budget individually. I will allow members of the public to speak either for or against any one of these departments as we go forward. So, I am opening the public hearing on fiscal year 2015-2016 budget. The first department we have in front of us is Department 11, Legislative Legal. It is page 1. What we have here, you can see in the final column, the budget as proposed is the second to the last column on the right. Administrative proposed FY 2016. The year before is the fiscal year 2015, current, and the final column is the difference. So reflected in this budget are some increases in salary that are contractual, increases for the non-union that come to approximately 3%. There's an increase in the solicitor's salary to compensate for increased legal responsibilities. And I think those are the big items in this budget. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the legislative legal budget department? Hearing no comments, I will move to the second. Department 12, planning, on page 2. This budget, with the columns are the same. The increases reflect an increase in hours for the planning director from 20 hours per week to 22 hours per week, with no, I'm sorry, 24. From 20 hours a week to 24 hours per week, but no raise in hourly wage. So the money that you see there is just for increased hours. There is a line item for professional services that is there in order to pay for work on the comprehensive plan. And those are the big, essentially the big changes there. Any questions or comments on the planning budget? Moving on.
I have one question.
Okay, go ahead.
Curious why the comprehensive plan that we're hiring out for that and the planner's not doing that.
Well, the planner is here, and I can let her answer, but my understanding is the changes in the legislation, the requirements of the comprehensive plan have made this a much more legally specialized document that needs to be written by consultants, people who have the knowledge, and there are only 2 folks in the state who currently do that.
Is that an attorney? Is that who would have to write that, or just it's a very specialized? Okay,
Yes, it's not an attorney, it's 2 different consulting firms.
I see.
And the planner does certainly other things, is responsible for subdivision regulations and 5-year road plan, and any subdivisions and planning board minutes and planning board agendas, implementing the comprehensive plan, but not ready in this.
I'd like to add also that 28,000 is just partial. It is an additional 10,000. It actually costs us a little over $38,000. We're breaking it up into 2 years, so it's actually more than the 28. It's close to, round off, it's close to 40,000 additional dollars.
Now, will the comprehensive plan be available to residents online? How will we access that?
It will be. I believe our current comprehensive plan is available online.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
You go to the town website, departments, in the menu bar. When they come down, you go to the planning, click on the planning department, and there are all different types of planning documents. Comprehensive plan, wastewater management plans, there are different things that are there.
Thank you.
But what's online is the current one, not the revised one, obviously. Mr. Sabasio?
Yeah, Mr. Lewis, from a historical point of view, most of the people in this back row are here all the time. I think I've sat here for 3 or 4 years and heard you say that we needed to pay the old planner more because she was writing the comprehensive plan. Am I mistaken in that?
No, you're not.
Okay, so
You're
you
not.
said that, and it didn't get done, so all the time you were incorrect in what you were presenting.
All the time I wanted a full-time planner, and I couldn't get it.
But that's not the question I
With a
asked.
part-time, but that's the answer that I'm giving you.
Okay,
All the time, if you have a full-time planner, they can do more of it. Now, obviously, I can go into more detail. The current planner is not entirely relieved of her responsibilities for the comprehensive plan, even though we're paying this to a consultant. The current planner still has to do the mapping, has to coordinate the plot and lot maps, so there's still significant work for them to do.
but you have changed the conversation because I did not bring up the new planner at all. Thanks.
You said the planner was not doing it. They
No,
are
I
doing
said
it, but
the
not
old
exclusively.
planner, excuse me, I said the old planner was not doing what you were presenting.
It didn't get done. I
All right,
agree.
thank you.
Didn't get done.
Thank you.
I could just, I was on the planning board last year. There were some elements of the comprehensive plan that were drafted by the planner. I believe that the quote that we actually got from Mason Associates to finish the plan reflected some of that work that had already been done. Obviously, there's a substantial amount that was not done.
Thank you.
Mrs. Ryder, did you have anything?
I did. I was just going to say, I was under the impression that the changes that the state is now requiring and the way that they, and the format that they are requiring it in was kind of a game changer for every single planner in the state, where in the past perhaps they could have done it, now they can't.
It has been a moving target, and the regs have changed even through the time that we've been drafting this plan. Mr. Ryder?
Being on the council from 10 to 12, and off the council for a couple of years, and now back on the council, in 2010 through 12, the planner was getting additional money going back 5 years ago to work on this comprehensive plan. And then after almost 6 years, we're doling out $40,000 to do the comprehensive plan. Something went wrong somewhere. That's all I'm gonna say.
I agree, something went wrong somewhere. When you leave the planner in a part-time position, I think that's what went wrong. Any further comments on the planning budget? Mr. Sheldon?
But going back historically, we've had a lot of different plans over the years. So far, none of them have done the town any good. Why do we keep wanting to invest more and more money into something that's not paying for us?
The charter requires the position. It's in the town charter, so we need to have it.
But you're asking for more money, not requiring, we're not saying limit the position. We're saying, why spend more money on a position that isn't doing us anything?
I would debate with you whether the planner has ever done any good. When we had a full-time planner, the planner obtained significant amount of grant money, dollars for the town, in excess of $300,000.
That's not happening now.
Not since the time we went to a part-time planner. There's a graphic difference that we saved, we went from 35 hours a week to 20 hours a week, and when we did, our grants went from $100,000 a year to $0.
Some of those are the same plan. Some of those years when you went from
No.
a part-time to
No,
no, okay.
it was the same planner who was full-time and then part-time. The grants were all obtained when we had a full-time planner, but after they were part-time, there's no more time for grants.
I'd like to get into that a little later on to some other line items and bring up an issue with some funds that we're gonna be expending, that we had some funds that were brought in under a part-time plan.
Mr. Lewis?
Mr. Sabasi?
Yeah, because I come to most of the meetings, I want to point out a significant difference in history that you've presented. The part-time planner that Gordon has just mentioned had applied for and received those grants, and they came in under the planner that was there, that you're speaking about, that person acquired the grants. The grants were acquired by the previous planner, and I was on that planning board. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's the case.
Well, I'm
I would
there
love
for
to
the
see the
history.
documentation
All right,
to
thank you.
support your history, but my documentation doesn't agree with that. Mrs.
Weren't
Rogers?
some of those grants matching funds that we couldn't
Of
come up
course,
with?
of course. For example, one of them was the generator at the Payne School.
Right.
It's a $49,500 grant with another $49,500 matching funds from the town. So certainly the town had to match it, but we weren't going to be able to purchase a $100,000 generator on our particular number. So some of them were matching to different amounts.
Okay.
Other comments, questions? Department 13, building and zoning. The big difference here, I think there's only one, and that's the building and zoning director job working hours being expanded from 20 to 24 hours per week. This was triggered by the fact that we have an open position and we're not receiving any qualified applicants for a 20-hour position. We're trying to beef that up in order to get somebody who is certified under the state requirements. I think that's the biggest change here. Questions, comments? Mrs.
I
Rogers?
just have a question now. I'm assuming that there, because this person would be new, there is no 3% raise included. I mean, in the 24-hour
I believe
addition.
there is.
There is.
I believe there is a 3% raise to this salary line item.
Why would you give 3% to someone who's not even hired yet and not to someone who has been hired?
That's an interesting
Well,
question.
the other point too is even with the 3% and the additional hours, we don't get anybody applying, what's your next move?
Well, we'll have to address that. Yeah. I mean, we're not advertising this dollar amount in our advertisements yet because it hasn't been approved by council. Once it is approved, and then we can advertise it later.
But, you know, this is, it just would appear to be completely inequitable to the current plan. So I would suggest that you decrease that by whatever the 3% is.
You can?
Because I have to work with the zoning and planning board and the planning person and whoever's there for the building inspector, we learned this year that without a building inspector, or without a building inspector who's in the town hall at all times, falls on the planner. When people come in, a lot of people go through the entire planning board process, even if it's a special use permit, they go to her first. So while she's trying to do her actual work, which I agree is number one in the comprehensive plan, while she's trying to do that, she's getting hit by people who have questions, because we have no building inspector, zoning official, whatever you choose to call him, on board. And if we do, he's there, or she's there, he or she, they're so little that it falls upon the planner. If the planner doesn't get involved, we end up with applications coming before. We have a whole board, we have a stenographer, and the application falls in the middle of a public hearing, which is terribly embarrassing to the town, because no one was there to advise these people pre-application that they shouldn't be doing this, or what they could have done better to get it, at least in an application process, for the zoning and planning to see. So it's embarrassing. It's discouraging to the applicants, and they're usually taxpayers. And if, you have to allow the planner to help them, and she gets caught up with them, past planners or her, because there's no one there. So getting that zoning official in and having them there is so important for that reason also. And just a quick comment that the person who's doing our comprehensive plan was a lawyer, working full-time as a solicitor downtown, and because so many municipalities have gone private with that, almost everybody is, no planners doing it anymore, it's over their head. Because of that, she's actually opened her own business and works with a consultant company and is doing almost every city in town.
Mr.
And
Lewis,
she's an expert.
that's 5 council members, is that a legal opinion? And each time this happens, I'm gonna keep asking that question.
Just that I see things, it's
Mr.
not
Lewis,
legal, it's
I'm
factual.
directing my question to you.
I don't believe we asked for legal
Which
opinion.
I believe is the procedure of the council.
I don't believe we asked for legal opinion, however, Mr. Block was a resident of the town and welcome to participate in the public hearing as any other resident.
Which, while I do agree, then somebody should be sitting in that position while she sits in the audience and
Sits in the
speaks as a
audience,
citizen.
correct.
I think you're done, yes?
I'm done.
Thanks. Okay, so when people are making comments, I'm making notes on here, so I made a note about questioning whether it should be decreased by 3%. I just want to let everyone know that this evening is just a public hearing. The council's not going to make any additions or cuts to the budget this evening. We will be doing that at a subsequent meeting at the adoption. We will review all of these comments on our own and make a determination whether to make a motion and whether the cuts will be made prior to adoption.
I mean, I think that the planner should get the 3%, but if you're not gonna give it to her because she hasn't worked a full year, then certainly someone who's not even hired yet shouldn't get it.
Is that in the back? Is that Mr. Carey?
I'd just like to speak on the building inspector. I understand the reasoning between why we want to give this raise or this additional money, because we need somebody that's qualified. And obviously, we can't get any applications. It is affecting the planning board's work, because the planner has to do things for zoning that she shouldn't have to do if there was a building and zoning official, so it's affecting our work, and we have quite a bit on our plate at this time, so I think it's important to keep that 3% in there. You know, and give it to the new employee, because I think we need a good qualified building and zoning official.
Thank you. Mr. Sabasi?
Yeah, I'd like to point out supply and demand, and there hasn't been very much of a supply. On the other hand, though, I'd like to bring up something I bring up once in a while about a civil engineer that do multiple jobs. Thank you. And you had applications that you chose not to address. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anything else on building and zoning? Okay, Department 14, Finance, on page 4. Again, there are raises that are equal to approximately 3% for each position, although there is one, I believe the deputy treasurer, that is in excess of 3%, and that is because it's bringing her salary up to the same level, or nearly the same level, as one of the union clerical staff at the town hall, which is contractual. Everything else flows from that. So here it's essentially just the salary raises. Any questions or comments on finance? Hearing none. We'll move on to Department 15, the assessor, on page 5. This is a part-time position, so there's also a 3% raise, but that looks like a very small number because it's a part-time position. There's a significant reduction of $10,000 because this is not a year for a statistical revaluation, so that comes out from last year's budget. And there's an increase in the software and support due to the increasing complexity of the software programs necessary for the department. Any questions or comments on the assessor budget? Hearing none. Move on to Department 16, General Administration, page 6. Let's see. few minor increases. The electric bill looks like a significant increase, and that's based upon actual historic costs this year. Heating oil is a significant reduction because of, again, actual historical costs this year. The contingency fund is a significant reduction because we found that we didn't need it at that level. And that's, everything else seems to be pretty stable. Any questions or comments on general admin? Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Paula Mottler.
Hold on one second.
Can you explain what the cemetery trust fund is
I can.
for 4350?
I can. Back in the late 1800s, the town council at the time established a cemetery trust, whereby people would come into the town hall, come in front of the council, and make a donation to the town. The amount is varied over the years.
Excuse me, we have a council member who's, you
Shaking
know,
my head.
being very distracted.
I can't see him doing that, but let's try not to be distracted. Are you disagreeing with what I'm saying, or are you just shaking me?
I'll wait for a moment to speak, I haven't spoken yet.
Okay, so you're not disagreeing with what I'm saying. Back in the 1800s, the fund was established, people would come in and pay a certain amount to the town. Now the amount is $100. They pay the $100 to the town in exchange for a commitment that the town would maintain the grave of a particular person in whose name they donated the money. So that's the perpetual care, it would be essentially mowing the grave 4 times a year. May, July, August, September, 4 times a year. So over the years, more and more people contributed money to the fund since the 1800s until today. And the interest in that fund, the interest that was accrued, was enough to continue to maintain the mowing of all those graves. Until recently, when the interest rate really plummeted to nothing, we're not getting interest on anything beyond a fraction of a percent. And the state law does not allow the town to tap into the principal that's in that fund. The town can only utilize the interest. So there's no more interest because it's not accruing. The town, since the 1800s, has taken people's money and agreed to perpetual care in contractual documents, essentially. So we still have to maintain it, but state law precludes us from using that fund. So the only way to maintain our commitment is to establish a line item. Well, this is the way that this town decided. Establish a line item that covers the cost of maintaining that mowing 4 times a year. So $43.50 is essentially $1,000 per year for mowing the cemeteries, $1,000 per time, and the $350 is for additional repairs on that equipment. Other towns have done this not by a separate line item, but by making it a portion of the public works responsibilities. So we've kept it out separately because there is still money in the fund, and someday it may recover for us to be able to mow using those funds again, but not at this time.
Where are these cemeteries?
There are 153 cemeteries in the town of Boston. They're scattered among 153, yes.
So these are the historical cemeteries, or?
Many of them are, they're not all entirely, there are some perpetual care grave sites in Hopkins Mills, or Phillips, or Spears across, which, I guess that parts of them are historical, but they're still being currently used. But some of the one down here on the top of the hill is one. There are some that are little 6-plot cemeteries back in the middle of the woods someplace that are truly historical. It's a combination.
And is the town gonna continue to, obviously you're gonna continue because the town promised perpetual care, but the town isn't accepting new donations, right? Since the town can't afford to do it anymore?
Have we accepted, I don't think we've accepted any donations in a couple of years.
Not to my knowledge.
No.
Last year we did.
We sort of put a hiatus on it.
Someone just said last year you
I
did.
think we had one last year.
Hmm?
Did we have one last year?
If not last year, the year before.
What did I
Within
say?
the last 24 months.
Oh, I did, you're right, Ron did. I
Did you
voted.
make it?
Yes.
No, you didn't, you made a donation.
Volunteer.
Oh, you made a donation to
That's
the,
right.
to the fund as a.
And I
as
didn't
a-
write it on my taxes.
as a- Mr. Sabasi was kind enough to make a donation to the fund, not in anybody's honor, not giving us another grade, but knowing that the fund was not stable, he just made a catch donation.
So the town has officially stopped doing that until they can afford to do that?
I don't know that I want to, I don't know why to say that. Did we have a formal vote to say we weren't going to do it, discontinue the program?
It's always been.
I don't think we did. I think we have. We could, certainly we could entertain that, but I don't think we have.
I believe, wasn't it the fact that even with the donations, the money in the fund isn't allowed to be spent, we were only supposed to spend the interest?
That's what, yes, that's
And
what I
there's
said.
no interest on it.
There's no more interest.
So even with the donations, you can't use that money.
State law.
No, we really can't. We really can't. We can only use the interest.
Right.
That's what the state law says. Mr. Rogers?
That's exactly what it was. The thing was set up in the 1800s, and specifically, you keep hearing them say that it's the town, that the town's responsibility, and I have all the paperwork, was only to collect the money and administer the fund. They would hire the person, whether it be by bid or whatnot, and only the interest was to be used to pay for the mowing. It was never intended to be taxpayer funded. As you donated, it went into the fund, the interest that it accrued would pay for the mowing. Until just shortly, a few years ago, and the only way to get a plot mowed is you would have to donate. That's the only way you could say, hey, I want this plot mowed. But we are all now donating to the fund, so technically we all have a right to say, I believe, like we should have all veterans mowed, cemeteries mowed, because we're all contributing. Can we afford to have every veteran's plot mowed in 153 cemeteries in town? And this is where the Pandora's box is. Our legal responsibility was to administer the principal to pay for the mowing. Once that principal had been depleted, they should have went from 4 mowings to 3, on down and down, until there was no principal to be expended. Our legal obligation was at that point not to turn it over and start making a taxpayer-funded cemetery plot mowing situation. There's many over at Phillips Cemetery. Ben Phillips manages that. He had told me that the town owes him quite a bit he never turned in for, but once he starts turning in for the multiple plots that he has there, and he has a legal right to do that, this fund will grow. And I believe everybody in the town has a responsibility now to say what plot they want to be mowed, because now you are all, like it or not voluntarily contributing, being forced to contribute through your tax dollars. So I believe every taxpayer has a right to say what plots to be mowed. That's the point. We met our obligation, and I think by making a line item, forcing us to pay, was not what this was set up to be. And it's being done the wrong way.
Mrs. Ryder?
My federal tax dollars, your federal tax dollars, go to maintain Arlington Cemetery, many military cemeteries, and not only in this country, but abroad. Out of decency, not an obligation, but out of human decency, to maintain the graves in a very personal, because they are founding fathers of this town. I just cannot imagine not doing it. It is the decent, right thing to do. Maybe you want to withhold your money from the federal government so that Arlington and all of those military cemeteries are no longer maintained. That is up to you. You can bring that up with the federal government. But this is ridiculous to say that you are not going to maintain the graves that were paid all those years ago in good faith. I mean, we're a community. Give me a break.
Mr. Rogers?
I agree with Ms. Ryder, and that's why a letter was transformed from a group of concerned citizens to this council when this became a line item to specifically, as we are now contributing to the fund, it was requested that this council mow every veteran's plot in all 153 cemeteries in the town of Corsica, which was presented to this council when this went into a line item. And nothing has been done since then. So I keep saying, if we're gonna do this, and she brought up a perfect right, a point, let's stop mowing every veteran's plot too, they deserve it.
So I'll respond to
You
it.
remember the letter?
I do, I have a copy of it, and there's, things have been done with regards to that letter, and I'll let you know. So the first thing, the comment I want to address is your comment that the town's obligation has been met. I disagree with that, because when the town, or any town, takes money from people and promises to them perpetual care of a cemetery, that obligation of promise of perpetual care doesn't go away just because the funds depleted. We took money from somebody, they gave it to, not we, but probably every town council since the 1800s has taken one or more perpetual care graves under its wing, accepted the money, accepted the obligation, and now that there's no more money there, I think it's unconscionable to say, we're not going to honor our obligation that we took people's money in good faith. The second thing, we did receive that letter. That letter asking to mow all of the graves, all the veterans' graves, prompted research into the number of graves. We had Ed Robinson, the president of the Foster Preservation Society, do the research. He gave us a list of hundreds of veterans in hundreds of cemeteries, and the estimate for getting them all mowed is about $12,500 a year. And if you think it should be done, and you're willing to make a motion to increase that line item to $12,500 a year, I'll support mowing all of those veterans' graves. But where is that gonna come from? If you're adding work, then you have to increase the funding. You can't just add. This does the 100-something graves that we have committed to, that the town of Foster has committed to. That's what this does, and that's all this does.
Again, my point was we met our obligation by using the principal. So,
Interest.
By using
by using the interest. It's very important to note that when you start taking taxpayers' money, you cannot pick and choose what roads you want to plow and what dirt roads you want to maintain. You collectively collect from all, you have to equally do it to all. And that is the problem with opening Pandora's box. We cannot afford the $12,000 to add them to it. So the point is, we met our obligation, we have opened Pandora's box. It's wrong that we're gonna just pick and choose and not do what we should be doing, because the fact of the matter is we can't afford the $12,000, just like we can't afford the $4,350, because we legally met our obligations by using the interest only. And I would refer this to legal counsel if I am not correct, that that was our obligation to only use the interest on the principal, and which we did.
Not so much an obligation, the law says you can't use the rest, the principal, for that. It doesn't say any more than that. It says you can't, but you've also got implied contract, you've got unjust enrichment, you've got people handing you money, and basically it's like a handshake. They think what you're doing for that money is what is stated to be done.
But
They
the
have-
contract was the interest only. I mean, we should.
No, that's not what they were told.
I'm not sure, when the town signs a contract that says you give me $100 and we'll provide perpetual care, I don't think there was a clause that said as long as this is interest only and when we run out of interest, we're gonna cease. I don't think that was their goal.
I believe the town did draw down the principal, and that's part of the problem. We were legally supposed to, even though the town, we didn't. So it's
Because
not
things
just the falling interest
are
rate.
very different than they were envisioned at that time.
So I don't think it's accurate to say we met our legal obligations.
And I think the previous council worked on this long and hard, trying to come up with alternatives and possible solutions, how to meet the town's obligation to the people who we promised and took money from, and how to do this the best possible way, and this is what we came up with.
I'd also like to mention another line item on this general administration,
Okay.
when you're done with this
As soon
discussion.
as we're done. And this was the best that we could find. As I said, other towns are funding it within their budget. Situate does it within the DPW, other towns do it as well. When there's no money left, the obligation doesn't cease, you know. My daughter was 17 years old and I didn't have any money, I'm still legally responsible to do something for another year, I still have to pay for it. But there's no money, well, that's irrelevant, there's a contract, it's a legal requirement. This is right.
I just want to reiterate that the definition of perpetual, we looked this up, is without end. Not without end as long as you can afford it out of the interest. It is without end. There is no other definition for perpetual.
Mr. Savasio.
Yeah, at some point, okay, this, I know, in coming to council meetings and watching this was discussed ad nauseum in the past. It's been discussed now. Is there a motion to cut it, or can we just end this? You've heard all the comments, can you move on?
Actually, there's no motions tonight, we can't make a motion to add or cut anything, it's a public hearing.
You can poll the board, so you can move on. You can do something.
I'm not gonna cut off people who want to speak either before or against it.
That's me.
Mr. Rice wants to speak against it again, it's a public hearing, he's entitled to. If someone wants to speak against it or for it in the audience, it's a public hearing, he's entitled to.
12:30.
I'm not gonna stop the discussion. Mrs. Rogers?
I just have a question for Renee, who is the listener.
I can't answer questions from the audience because I'm being stopped from making opinions, so you can ask the chair.
So what's?
Okay, and you can direct it to Renee. Now that,
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm having a hard time hearing just because, thank you, I'm sorry.
now that it is a line item in the budget, and now that everybody is contributing, do we have a right to ask for cemeteries to be mowed? I don't think that was, I know Renee addressed the other thing about the actual perpetual care, but because all taxpayers are contributing now, can anybody request that?
That's not the way the plan has been set up.
No, but I'm asking for a legal opinion.
I would say no, I'll let the solicitor weigh in on it.
It's not something I'm willing to give an opinion on right now off the cuff, without seeing all the documentation. But what comes to my mind is if you're controlling it in this fashion now, I don't know if you intend to continue offering perpetual care. But certainly, like anything else, you could just figure out how much it's going to cost in the future and try to raise it. I mean, it would be astounding, the increase, but at least you could do that. That's the way you would attack this. You don't stop what you're doing, you simply raise the price to be commensurate with the actual cost. So, but you can't go back on the promise by the town for those people.
That's one.
Years ago,
Mr.
they
Hawes?
made the commitment to all the people that lost a loved one or something, and they paid according to the rates at the time. And they were assured that those certain graves would have special care. I think it's our obligation, when we're elected by the people, it's our obligation to guarantee the people that have paid their money to take care of the graves that we've agreed to. Now, if you want to set up some kind of a policy where you're not going to grant perpetual care from this moment on, that's something else, I don't know. But the people that pay their good money, we are obligated as electors of this town to guarantee those people satisfaction for the money they invest. A lady told me, she said, I paid $400 for it. My mother and father and a baby. She said, I want those graves taken care of. She said, if I can't, I'm going over there and I want my money back. And I said, I don't blame you if that happens. You know, I mean, as decent citizens, for God's sake, if nothing else, we ought to take care of those people that cost us $4,350 a year.
further questions or comments? Mr. Rogers, you wanted to address another line?
No, it was just contingency. I know I mentioned it before, but there's new people in the audience. Quite a few new people on, so they haven't probably noticed this. Just on the contingency, it was 45. We did reduce it to 30. But if you look at years past going back, the most we ever spent was in 2013, and it was 12,184, and that's actually reasonable. It was kind of high that year, is because we were paying like $4,000 for the perpetual care, which brought that well up to 12. Then it came out, went to DPW. In 2014, it was in the DPW line item, and our contingency dropped for expending for that year $4,909. We've had 45,000 in it this year, and we've hardly spent hardly any of that, and we're still at 30. So if you kind of do a zero-based budgeting, you don't throw $30,000 in a line item when you've never spent more than 4 or 5. Just something that I've said along, and it's been moved over. That's all I got.
Okay, well, we are spending more out of contingency because we've been acquiring vehicles through the LESO program. 2 military trucks, a dump truck, a Unimog, and now a bulldozer. And the contingency fund has been paying to transport those. So we've probably acquired $290,000 worth of equipment for $8,000 in shipping costs. And that
Kelly, what page is the year-to-date expenditure on contingency? I don't know, current year-to-date.
It's Department 16, I don't have year-to-date expenditure.
You don't have it with you?
I don't have that report with me, but I
I
can
got
do
the
it right
report, I was
now.
trying to
if
find it.
I have it open.
It goes from 15 to 65.
What are you looking for specifically?
Year-to-date expenditure on contingency. There was 45 in there, how much did we expended?
I'm looking right now.
Mid-year. We've got balance of $44,750, if I'm reading that correctly.
I have 40,000.
40,000, so we've spent 5,000 of the 45. So again, that goes to the fact exactly what I've said following through the previous years.
I don't imagine that's correct, because I know we spent $6,800 on the furnace for the town hall. That came out of contingency.
Came out of, I believe, DPW.
You asked him to take it out. You told him to.
Yeah, that came out of
The
DPW.
thing, the question is, at the end of the year, if he doesn't have enough money in his department, you were going to look at that again and possibly transfer some of those expenditures over.
The police department chimney came out of building and grounds. Yes.
The only thing that's come from contingency right now is towing of a bulldozer, $4,500, and $250 for something else.
The other trucks? Where did the other trucks
The
come
other,
from?
the other issue
One
is
came from the
DPW,
police department, the other came from
You asked all the time.
DPW, the police paid for it.
Yeah. The other issue is going to be legal fees, because if I followed the other towns, I would have been charging that contingency account $150 an hour to handle pension litigation, arbitrations, and other things. But I managed to get us a damn good lawyer for $15 an hour with some of the other cities and towns. If I was Situate, I would have sat there and charged him $150 an hour and taken it out of contingency, but I didn't do it.
So, just to follow up on your comment, Kelly, does DPW look like it's gonna be,
It may, they're overspent in a few line items on it.
so overall, it's okay, but
It's only March with theirs.
Well, my point was, we've spent 5,000 out of the 45,000 this year. We only spent, last year, we spent 4,900. And 2 years ago, we spent 12, but 5 of that, 4,000 of that was for the mowing of the cemetery. So again, we used to have a 15, a 10, and a $15,000 line on it, and it was never really spent at that point. Now we're up to 45, we kicked it back to 30, but still, I don't see us spending that. And I bring it up whether I was a citizen going over these budgets, and I'm not gonna change how I act when I'm sitting up here as a council member. It's always been something I spoke about.
so would you prefer to split that line item so that there's
Well-
less in contingency and an additional line
I'm
item for
just,
lesser?
to answer your question, again, it's all been moved over, I'm just discussing, so people see what we spent in the past, they may not have picked up our previous spending and what we spent year-to-date. I don't know if any of you guys got any year-to-date expenditures, so you can cross-reference on what we've spent to the line item. It's an important document, you may not have been supplied.
Mrs. Rogers first.
Is that 30,000 added to what is now left in the contingency fund?
No.
It doesn't roll over from year to year.
Okay,
Okay, so it's not, it's new money for the new year.
all right.
Mrs. Ryder? I'm gonna go like
You know, not having a cushion is just bad budgeting. Because you quite frankly, again, the definition of contingency is a possibility that you absolutely cannot predict, which the town is fraught with. You don't know when some legal matter might land in your lap, or there could be, you know, maybe a boiler has to be replaced that you're not planning on. Or maybe the plumbing goes, or the town well goes, or something like that. The money does not just evaporate if it's not used.
Yeah.
It goes back into the general fund, correct?
Does.
Okay, so to have a cushion, I think very few people do not have in their own personal lives some sort of a cushion for, you know, a possibility for, you know, emergencies. You have to have an emergency fund. If you don't, then I think, you know, there's one thing if you can't do it, if you just absolutely have no resources to be able to do it. But I think any financial planner or whatever say, yes, you need to build in a cushion because you just don't know.
Mr. Candelo?
I think we need to add a new line item if we reduce contingency, because we need money to transport these different pieces of machinery that we're getting for free, basically, from the LESO program. And the alternative to the LESO program is paying full price for new equipment, which I don't think is an option in the future.
Kelly?
That's the balance in the contingency fund now. We've used approximately $5,000. But it's obligated for more because we have Mason, which is doing the comp plan. About $4,500 will be charged from there. And then there's the possibility of some of the transportation that was charged to the police and DPW and the chipping. Those combined were about, let's see, what do you think? At least about 5,000 plus her 4, so that would be a possibility of another 9
The arbitration that is scheduled for June,
June.
where would those fees come from?
from there.
Right, that's gonna be about 1,400 times 3 for the arbitrator himself. Or half of that.
Mrs. Rogers?
Aren't we supposed to have a certain percentage of our total budget in an account, a reserve?
Yes, that's different than this.
Okay. Why is it different?
Well, the reserve fund is not something that the council has authority to spend. It's in a special account, so that if there's a major emergency,
Right.
you can go to financial town meeting and request use.
So it can be pulled out in an emergency?
Well,
Sure.
Okay.
And
I was just wondering.
we would do that if a bridge went out, or
Right.
if the police station caught on fire and you needed a new building.
Okay, so wouldn't that be emergency fund that Ms. Ryan was talking about?
Well, not usually small amounts. I mean, if you had to do a $3,000 repair that you didn't budget, you wouldn't want to call a financial town meeting and incur the advertising cost and the canvassers cost and all of those costs, because it would cost you more than $3,000 to get the $3,000.
I was just wondering.
So for a big expense, yes. For something small, that's what the contingency takes.
Okay.
Mr. Rogers?
Speak to 2 points that were mentioned, emergency that she said. We actually we have a $900,000 forfeit reserve fund that can be used for that. And as you know, your council, previous council, did that to repair a bridge. And to have that money set aside, it was not a financial town meeting done, it was an emergency declared by the council, and then the money was expended to be done. Now, I'd like to speak,
That's not the case. The council has to declare the emergency,
Right.
you're correct. But then the financial town meeting has to authorize it.
And
The
that's-
council can declare it, but if the financial town meeting says, no, we couldn't spend it.
and then speaking to what Joe was talking about, saving some money or needing money to have stuff holding on. Later on, when we get to the Public Works Department, you're gonna notice that, and this is where I believe the money should be coming from, because there's a 100% increasement in the line item for professional services from 7,000 to 14,000. And to me, professional services, whether it be cracking rocks or renting stuff to do that, professional services would be hiring a professional truck driver to haul a bulldozer from one state to another would be considered professional services. And that's why I thought we went up 100%, adding an additional $7,000 in that line item. So it's kind of funny how we talk to the same things in different line items at different budgets. You know, we can't have them in two different places. So I assume Lesco, transportation, paying a trucker to haul something is a professional service, and that's why we went up on professional services in DPW 100%.
We'll discuss that again when we get to DPW.
I'd like to answer that because that's actually a lot of that money, and the increase is actually for renting of cranes to repair Johnson Road Bridge and Anthony Road Bridge.
Yeah, it's not.
That's rental equipment, basically. I'd be happy to increase that line item to include the LESO program.
Kelly?
And if you were to budget for the towing, I believe you would want to do it in possibly Department 16, which is general, simply because it's not necessarily DPW equipment you're getting, it's police equipment.
Police equipment.
You should be budgeting for it. So that way, if you budget for it miscellaneous, it covers both departments as the need arises.
Further questions or comments? Department 17, Human Services. Page 7, the only significant increase here, again, is to the salary line item, which is trying to, this is a part-time position, and it's trying to bring this director up to the hourly pay level of a union clerk who's in town hall. So this is in excess of 3%, but it actually doesn't quite get this position up to that level.
3.3%.
It doesn't, but it still doesn't get her up to the same level hourly pay as a clerk. Someone has supervisory responsibilities, and they're making less money than people that perhaps they would be responsible to supervise. That's the point, why this is higher than the 3%. Questions or comments about Human Services? Hearing none. Page 8, Department 18, Community Funding. The three organizations up at the top are organizations that provide services to the town in the form of drug counseling, mental health, heating oil assistance, I believe. And those are all level funded. So there's really no, actually one of them looks like it went down because their request went down. Any questions or comments on community funding? Hearing none. Department 19, refuse removal. The grade out number $70,000 for the Rhode Island Resource Recovery. That's the tipping of recycling. And that number's not firm yet because they have to give us that number. Okay?
We're gonna have a proposal of reduction to 66,000.
They lowered it?
They lowered our cap, but I did an analysis on how much we've been determined
Was it?
how much we've been recycling, and
Right.
so I looked for a couple of years worth of reports, and it looks like our recycling rate is actually improving.
It is.
So therefore, After I priced it out, it looked like it was 66,000 is reasonable. I spoke to Joe about it, and we have a recycling fund also, that when we get a dividend or some sort of payback fund, we're out of resource recovery, we put that money in there. So if they need to, they can fund any extras from there.
Like the mattresses and the electronic.
Things that we really
Recycling.
just can't predict.
And then the increase to the Rambone disposal, that's a cash pickup and that's a contractual increase. Questions or comments on that? Hearing none. Page 9, Department 20, Police. So what we have here is the biggest increase there has to do with contractual salary increases for the officers and the dispatchers. There are lots of reductions throughout there. The police chief has indicated that he does not want to raise this year in order to help fund his department.
Thank you.
And are there any questions or comments on, any questions or comments on this department? Hearing none. Page 10, Department 21, Animal Control, 3% salary increase, the rest is minor little adjustments for insurance, etc. Any questions or comments on animal control? Hearing none.
Just in general,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't really.
Oh, no, go ahead, I didn't see it here.
I know, I didn't raise it, I'm sorry, it just came to me. You know, we're given, in general, okay, I hear all the arguments about bringing people up to parity, but we are giving 3% raises and a 1% inflation. So, I keep hearing that, and so, and I heard your argument about, believe me, this isn't personal, that a manager or an administrator is making less than union. However, that's common in the workplace. So a lot of what's said here is opinion and not factual. But we are given 3% raises and a 1% inflation.
Well, that's what was being proposed in this.
Well, I'm just pointing out.
Okay, Department 22, Other Public Safety. We have a new line item here for an EMA director. The council discussed this at length. We had difficulty identifying candidates for EMA director. Most other towns compensate them. FEMA also will match the funds that we pay for our EMA director. They'll match them to assist it. So that's a new line item, $3,100. The increases to the fire departments and ambulance corps are as they requested. The council did not make any changes, either up or down, to the requests of the fire departments or the ambulance corps. Any questions or comments on other public safety? Mr. Sabathia?
Yeah, I sat with a fire chief from Connecticut the other day, and he told me there are 80% less fires now than in the past. I honestly didn't get any statistical data from him. And once again, I'm going to say that the dollar amount I heard of what we own in fire equipment was $1 million something. But really, in total, we've invested someplace around $3 or $4 million in total for 3 fire stations. And until we bring every house in with a fire alarm, our ability to save somebody's house is almost nil. I know, now I've just said that, and I've got a ladies auxiliary, an ex-fire person, and a real fire person, but there's some reality to the situation of the amount of equipment and the amount of effort we put into the fire companies and the amount of money we have invested and our ability, return on investment. I didn't say that towards the ambulance corps, I said it towards the fire companies. Thank you.
Other questions and comments?
We're just gonna make one comment,
Chief, go ahead.
in regards to saving these houses. Our volunteers, or your volunteers, do save houses, they save them routinely, they put their lives in jeopardy, and they do save houses.
There was no comment about volunteers, there was a
No, no, no,
comment
but-
about finances.
No, but again, they do save houses.
Okay, there was a comment about finances.
Other questions or comments? Okay, we'll move to page 11. Department 24, Public Works. So again, up at the top, 3% raise for the director, general salaries, our contractual increases. There's a decrease in $10,000 in road oil, as that's something that the town no longer utilizes and will no longer utilize. There is a significant increase, there's actually 2 pages to this department, it's a large department. A significant increase on page 2 to the building and grounds line item, which is a more accurate reflection of what's actually been happening. Building and grounds not only maintains the buildings, but provides things like toilet paper and paper towels and hand soap and all the various things in all the town buildings, cleaning supplies, salt for the walks, all of those different things. And the professional services up at the top again, I think Mr. Kydell already addressed that. Are there questions or comments?
I have a comment about the Green Acres. Green Acres looks awesome. They keep that all mowed for the fishing, and we really should do something with that property. Some kind of middle of town thing. It's used so much now, we ought to find other uses for it. You got the Grange there, the library there, the church there. It should, I think, be utilized more.
And it looks good, you said.
It does, they do a good job. And they keep it all mowed where the water hydrant is. It does, it looks really nice, Lucy Valley looks really nice.
Thank you. Sir, sitting next to Mrs. Muncher.
You missed the march show.
I didn't want to make that
So, I'll make it for you.
I'm the lucky one. I noticed there were 27,000, that can't be just toilet paper and hand soap.
I'll let him address it.
Yeah. No, yeah, they do use a lot of toilet paper, but that's not what it is. Our buildings are getting older and older, and they've been neglected for quite a few years.
It was catch-up.
Yeah, it's catch-up, basically. We have a lot of rotten windows and things like that that need replacing before there's more serious damage.
Woody Loudon, John?
What's that?
Woody Loudon?
Oh, and Woody Loudon too. They're redoing Woody. Yeah.
I do want to mention, he did, and this is where zero-based funding gets me going. If you look at road salt on the first page, you see 0, 10,000, 0,
road-
10,000.
Road oil.
Road oil, he eliminated, found it that's been eliminated and prioritized. So basically that 10,000 disappeared from there, that was never being used, but in reality was being used in the past for buildings and grounds, and actually took it out and put it where they've been using it.
Reallocated.
I had a commitment, and that they would not all of a sudden say, all of a sudden, we need road oil 2 or 3 years down the line and jump another $10,000 in there, and he gave us that commitment, and I told him I was gonna hold him to it. But that 10 was pulled out of there and slid over there, which is what it's being used for anyway.
So in actuality,
It
it's more
clarified
like
the line.
37,000.
Right, so it's not as big of a jump.
Right.
But it's to maintain the buildings and
Correct.
to keep the police station from falling down on his head.
And that's not easy.
That ain't.
That's 27,000, we're gonna do that.
No.
Mrs. Wagner?
Did any of the town buildings suffer damage from ice dams as many homes did?
I don't believe so,
We
Joe.
got very lucky on that.
We just don't know what's going back.
All right, stop now.
We did have a frozen sewer main that went out to the septic tank and then backed up into the basement of town hall. So
Human services.
that needed to be repaired. That's all taken care of. This
Must have done double on it.
That's the only,
It's the only way to freeze.
damage that we have. Mr. Savasio?
Yeah, I'd like to suggest, Joe and I were looking at the windows today that I think I told you about 3 years ago, that are still rotting. And if you want to stop the rot after you fix them, if you ever do, you need to cut down all the pine trees in front of the police station and the big pine tree that's by Kelly's window there. That's what's causing all the rot, black mold, and the rest of it. So until you deal with the cause of the problem, fixing it it's a waste of money. Yeah, we got
Further questions and comments? Mrs. Marshall, and then
Comment on the DPW, the snow plowing. After living here for, many years, when we first moved out here, the plowing was fabulous. This year, it would snow and our road would not get plowed until the snow was done. And on some, on a few occasions I had to call because we had to get out, and the response was, we only have 2 guys out on the road. So whatever you're doing for snow plowing, please fix it.
Well, we had a drastic reduction with people out, union members out, and
This was the all season, and there was so many instances where they were
They were out
driving.
all season.
They were out all season.
it wasn't.
Whatever, you can hire subcontractors, there are people who want
I
to work.
agree.
So this year was the worst, people driving in unsafe conditions, and,
Well, it was
Please
one
fix
of the
it.
worst winters we've had in years.
well, the plowing was, you need to fix it.
Well, we need to fund a new truck.
Well, funding the new truck is in the budget.
We do.
However you need to fix their
Exactly.
budget.
We do have issues with DPW, with the equipment, with the manpower.
This year was awful.
Yep.
A lot of unsafe driving conditions, and, I think it was not being responsible on the part of DPW, so please fix it.
I have to disagree with that.
Okay. I saw Mr. Sheldon's hand first.
Has there ever been a rise audit in town limits?
I'm sorry?
Has there ever been a rise audit of the town limits?
I'm not sure. Not as long as I've been around. Did your council ever do a rise on it? No. I don't think so.
Rise will replace all light fixtures that are too old.
Actually, I think
We actually did
it
that
was
years
done,
ago.
and that's how they explained part of the reason they changed all the lights and did all that to ruin it, and they shut the town hall down on Fridays, which also was why they said they saved electricity and diesel and stuff. But it was all lumped in.
I don't know that we actually had the rise people from town.
There's a similar program for Windows.
For what?
Windows.
Windows. Mr. Pepillo?
We are currently looking at grants to replace all the town hall and various lights around town with LED, which reduces the power consumption dramatically.
Rice pays for it. Give it a money.
Any further
We'll work on that.
questions or comments on the Public Works Department? Hearing none. Move to page 13. We have 3 small departments. Try to deal with these things together. 31, Conservation Commission is level funded, no change from last year. Department 32, Land Trust, level funded, no change from last year. Department 33, Libraries, they're asking for a 3.5% increase, $5,125. Are there any questions or comments on any of those 3 departments?
These are for the 2 existing libraries right now.
That's correct. It's money that the town gives to them in support. They get more money from grants, more money from the state. But yes, this is to fund the existing
Two
libraries.
existing libraries.
Further questions, comments? Hearing none. Page 14, Department 34, Recreation. only change here is a little bump to the recreation director's salary. Stipend essentially. Any questions or comments on recreation? Hearing none. Page 15, capital. So there's two different departments here. 41 is capital. Those are the things that we're going to expend from the capital fund. Department 42, capital, this is money that we're putting into the capital fund. So some money goes in, some money goes out every year. So the line items for expenditure under the capital finance, $18,100. That is 2 copy machines, one for finance and I believe one to be staged in the police department. 43,865 under police, that is the lease on the police vehicles. 147,035 Public Works Highway, that is $50,000 to repair the Johnson Road Bridge, culvert, right, to reline it and repair that. And 97,000 and change for paving throughout town in various locations. Public Works equipment, $90,000, that is the dump truck. It's being added to money from previous year to totally fund the dump truck. Public Works buildings and grounds, $99,700, that is a wash bay, that's the bulk of it, is a wash bay be located between the police department and DPW so that the vehicles can be washed, remove the salt from them, and extend their life. And the other approximately $18,000 is to put a new roof on the old portion of the DPW garage.
Mr. Lewis,
Yes?
can I use the wash bay?
I don't know. I don't know if it's,
I'm trying.
but let me finish to go through the rest of the expenditures and then we'll talk about any of them. The $137,500 for the engineering board is, I believe, the third installment in a fire truck for Moosuc Valley Fire Department. And the $30,000 is for Payne School, and I believe that is towards an increased security entrance. And I'm gonna let the school committee folks chat about that as well. So, do we have any comments or questions? Mr. Macho?
How much was going for a bay so we can wash vehicles again?
Approximately $80,000.
So $80,000 so we can wash the salt off the vehicles.
It's for,
Slightly
yes,
more than that.
it's for the erection of a building and plumbing and the electrical, and so that's the primary focus of the building, but there's another component of the building on the police department end that is gonna be for impoundment of vehicles and inspection of vehicles. So
Evidence storage.
Garage.
Evidence storage, right now, our evidence is being stored in, and the nice looking antique building over here next to the antique police department that's fallen down, that's where we store, or if there's a fatal accident or a vehicle that we have to get out of the weather, that's what we have, but it's unsafe for, it's safe for the termites in there, but it's not safe to put a vehicle in there,
So it's a multi-purpose then, it's not
Yes.
just...
Yes.
Although I do agree that that's a really good thing to have, I'm just, debating whether in these economic times when, most people here haven't seen raises in 7 to 10 years, it seems like a lot to spend right now. That's just like an opinion, my opinion, but I do think that's definitely a good idea, especially extending our vehicles.
That's the goal, to extend the life of the vehicles that, are costing us $150,000. we can get 2, 3, 4 more years out of them, that's, seems to be a reasonable investment. Mrs. Ryder?
Does the DPW have their own well? That isn't that building?
I don't believe so, maybe it's a shared well.
The shared well. And is there, I would assume, because you're washing salt off, that there has to be a special containment for all of the water?
There is some,
That is,
yes, and there certainly will be an updated containment facility with this. Mr. Candela?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that, I did visit other towns with wash bays, and they say on average, we can extend the life of our trucks by about 5 years, which in the long run is a good investment, in the long run. It's, short-term, painful, but in the long run, it's really worth it, being that they cost that, at least $140,000 for us to go.
And you're doing water collection to help create, have the water so you can wash those vehicles?
Well, we have a water reclaim system, so we keep using the same water over and over. That's what a lot of the cost is on the wash bay, the reclaim system, so the salt isn't going into the environment at all.
Further questions or comments on this capital? Okay, so the second department there, capital, actually I wanted to, now we have 2 school committee members here. At the last meeting, the Isaac King School request was 42,000, 43,000, and there was something, we were told that the school was gonna fund outside of the capital. So we reduced the Payne School down to 30,000, and I think the council would like to hear your opinions on that, if that's a problem or if that makes sense.
I think we had said that we're going to take on, are you talking about how we're going to take on the dishwasher and the technology
Yes.
in our own budget, right? So it's technology in the amount of about 13,000, dishwasher in the amount of about 12,000. I think our main issue is just that we're not putting any money aside this year for this immense cost of the heating system that we're going to have to do, which Aroni and Associates, the architect, had quoted upwards of, $335,000. And as I mentioned before, we have classrooms that go down 50 degrees for several hours. We're doing repairs now. I think we're spending about $10,000 a year to do the repairs in the system. That needs a major upgrade. So I think that was our major issue, was just that we're not putting any funding this year, so that this, over 2 years, we could move toward it. And I think too, at our last school committee meeting, we had discussed that as long as we can legally do it, I can't say for sure because we haven't voted, but we're interested in helping out with some of these capital projects, and we can have a capital reserve account on the school side. So, we are trying to work with the town, and where there are surpluses, perhaps we can, come up with some sort of formula toward directing some of those monies there, but I don't have a firm number on that yet.
Yeah, the treasurers are working with you on that?
I went in to talk to her. We made a phone call to RIDE just for informational purposes to find out if we're eligible for housing aid reimbursement if the school has a capital reserve fund, and we are. The only issue is that any housing aid that comes back goes back to the town. And I think, just personally, I would hope that if we contribute in that way, if we're able to, that housing aid reimbursement could be directed back to the school capital reserve accounts, and we can continue to try to work together on that.
Sure. So short of the conversation about the heating system, which is ongoing, does this $30,000 meet the other needs?
Now I'm remembering what we're talking about. Okay, well, that small matter of, so we've had a flow test done, there's no failure. The well is 40 years old. So based on, someone can correct me if they want to, a recommendation where it was brought up at a planning meeting that we could use a new well. We looked into a loan forgiveness plan. I don't know what it's called, a loan forgiveness, Kelly, I don't know.
That's the terminology.
Right, so basically, the town would have to apply for a loan for the well, and then 90% of that cost would be covered. So we would basically be getting a new well at the school, which is also the emergency building for the town, for $10,000 on was it like an $80,000 or $90,000?
$60,000.
$60,000. So I think our issue is just that, this this is not only the school, but it's also the town emergency center. And, you know, the way we're gonna find out that a well isn't working is by, the well isn't working, we close school indefinitely, go out for RFPs, you know, and we have an opportunity to get a new well for 10,000. So I think that was the main issue.
So is that 10,000 coming from the loan forgiveness program that you're going to apply for, or is that something
So
that
the
you're
school
requesting in capital?
Yeah, the school can't apply for a loan, the town would have to do that.
Okay.
Right.
It was removed as part of, she said the reduction was the dishwasher is actually the well and technology.
Okay.
So it's just that, you know, agree to disagree, you all don't want to take use that opportunity for the loan forgiveness. So, that was just the only, I think that was the main issue.
I think the well for $10,000 makes sense. The impression I was given was that the school, it wasn't really a priority for the school.
It was on our list of things that we wanted to do, and
But it was characterized as though the planning board is almost coerced to.
I think it changed
No,
because
the
we
well
got
was
this
the
loan.
The well was the priority, the furnace wasn't. That's why
Correct.
we skipped over the furnace and put the well forward.
Right, the well was above that, and then we had this issue this winter with the classrooms going down so low in temperatures, and then Aroni and Associates came in and, told us we should be replacing it. So things were shifting and changing as they do here, things come up and one thing is a priority and then you get new information. But I think that the well, to me, is a priority because of that loan forgiveness program. But as you all mentioned, it hasn't failed yet, so.
Well, I'd like to add on.
Go ahead.
You can drill a brand new well tomorrow and fill that one in. And the brand new well will have a great flow rate like the current well you have. And the brand new well can fail in 1 year. Stands the fact that if you've got a well that's been operating fine for 40 years, I think your bet's better off staying with that than drilling a new well and then going bad in 5 years, because the first few years, you may have a problem. The well is fine, and again, the loan forgiveness program it's funded 90% by the state. Well, that's my other pocket.
Right.
So you're just getting your money from the other pocket. There's nothing wrong with a well. I think you're actually creating a higher risk by drilling a brand new well, replacing something there's nothing wrong with. I think your new well might have a greater risk of failing than the one you got.
I understand your point.
So, I just want to be clear. Is it the school committee's position, or if you can't speak for the committee, your position, that this $30,000 in capital for Payne School is adequate, or is not adequate and should be amended somehow? What is?
We meant to discuss it as a committee, so I think I can just share what we discussed that day, that we thought it would be prudent to have some monies put aside this year toward this exceptionally high expense that is still unknown, but is at least at a minimum of $335, even if we're talking about good faith efforts from the school to contribute toward this, there are some school committees that would spend out every penny of their surplus every single year so that they didn't show a surplus, and they would just do that and no one would know it. We're trying to be really transparent with where we're spending in our lines, and if we have a surplus, we're maintaining it and not trying to spend it down by June 1st so that there's nothing there to take. So I think it just makes sense that this is a huge amount of money. I think other big projects, you put aside money for several years, right?
Yes.
So that was just what we were hoping would happen, that some money would be put aside.
Go ahead, Kelly.
The discussion was that this year the capital is so great and our capital project fund is so underfunded that if you can only hold the money for 2 years before it has to revert back, so if you're not going to start the process at the end of that 2 years, the money's going to revert back to capital anyway. Everybody's clear on the fact that they need this done, so I think the discussion was that it was probably more prudent just to leave it in capital and then start appropriating for it next year, so that the timeline wouldn't run out. Because after 2 years, it's considered abandoned anyway, and it goes back into capital.
And clearly, if the furnace we do have a recourse. If the furnace completely stopped, we do have an emergency fund that will that'd be clearly be an emergency fund, just like a bridge, where we could get it.
One question about that, though, I know that to get housing aid reimbursement, it has to be come from a dedicated capital reserve. Do you make a transfer in the
To
middle of
capital,
the
and
year?
expenditure would go through capital, but the transfer, I believe, would go into capital from the emergency fund.
Okay. And just so you know, there was the possibility that we would try to do this next year, not 2 years from now, next year. So we were thinking that within this 2-year budgeting process, we could possibly get it done next year. We're not hoping to do this in 3 years. I mean, kids were being told to wear layers to school because, there was a lot of problems with this. It was hours of 50 to 60 degree weather, little children, cold, not really learning much. I think it's not conducive to learning.
Okay, so I attended one of your school committee meetings a few weeks back, maybe a week back. And if the heating system is a priority, then maybe this $30,000 that's set aside here should be for the heating system. And what do you already have on hand in your capital fund right now? If it's dedicated for another project, but that project is less of a priority for you than the heating system, then perhaps we should reapportion that or reallocate that. And between that and this $30,000, now you have $90,000 towards the heating system. And that's just reorganizing your priorities, and I was wondering if that's an option, and if not, why?
Well, there was a committee brought together to assess security in the building after the Newtown tragedy, Sandwood tragedy, and this very thoughtful process came forward that we don't have a safe entryway, that it's just, police chief could speak to that. We want to move forward with that as a school committee because we think it's a major safety issue, and part of this is I think we need to ask for what we want to, and your hard job is to say what we can have. I'm not willing to offer from the school committee that we don't think that's a priority, because we do. So you all have to decide, it's your decision about what you're going to fund.
I'm more inclined to say, we'll give you so many dollars and you set the priority. Because it's the school and you have to decide what's a greater priority for your kids, the heating system or the security.
But if it's approved at a financial town meeting, it's a specific item, isn't that what, I don't think this is treated as a bottom line budget and capital, isn't it specifically voted on as items in the budget? I don't know, Kelly.
Yeah, it's supposed to be, but I think in an emergency, if your heating system dies tomorrow and we need money, then that becomes the top priority. And this entrance, all of a sudden, is maybe not. And if it's the middle of the winter and you don't have a heater, you can't run school at all. So it's...
So I think what you're asking is, I would say, put as much money toward it as you can so that we're covering part of it this year and part of it next year. I see this as your decision because you're deciding how much to put in each line. I would put half down in the heating this year and have the other half next year. I don't know what, that's your budgeting choice.
So you're asking for like $170,000?
I'm not asking for anything, I'm just saying that,
Well, that's half.
Yeah, this has come up, to me, I'd be looking at capital, the whole overall for the town and saying to myself, how much do we know everyone needs next year for capital in different departments? How much do we have? And how much could we start putting toward that over 2 years?
I think the answer is we don't have enough to meet everyone's capital needs. Every fire departments, police departments, new rescue vehicles, we don't have enough. So we're in the position of making priorities. I'm going to recognize Mr. Sabowski from the school committee.
We're talking about a well, okay, so let me give you the big picture about the Payne School. There's no insulation, all right? So you're gonna put a new heating system in, you have no insulation in the building whatsoever. You have ice flows for different reasons. The building committee has been meeting, there's a building, I don't even know what we call ourselves, but anyway, we're a maintenance committee, okay? We actually met with the roofer today and talked about putting 2 new gables on. We spent maybe $20,000 this year shoveling snow off the roof. That one year, putting 2 gables on would alleviate some of the shoveling. You have aluminum flashing, you have gutters, you have all kinds of stuff that's been done over the year. The way the roof was put on was wrong. We talked to the contractor today. We have a, what do we call it, a safety committee that met and talked about an entrance. But in reality, when I stayed at the Hyatt this weekend in Boston, they had 4 feet bare outside every window. And we had 8 feet of snow in front of all the windows. So most fires take place in the winter, and we have a courtyard that the snow came off the roof, and there's at least now 10 dents that we can see in the sidewalls. We lost 3 windows with shards of glass like this out of 1. I can go on and on with the deterioration of that building, all right? So I'm not sure, see, if I was prioritizing, I'd be more worried about putting double doors into the courtyard and the police chief and the highway director buying a piece of equipment that I could get the snow away from the windows. We bought $37,000 worth of egress windows, or egress, and there's 8 feet of snow in front of them when we're done, okay? And we got 3 feet of ice falling off the roof that are gonna go through the new windows we bought. So there's so many problems in that building, all right? I honestly don't care when you fund the well or that kind of stuff. Next year, there's going to be a list that your council is going to have to decide how much you want to put forth to saving the one piece of fixed asset you have in this town that's worth the most. You have bricks blowing off the wall because there's seepage in behind them, all right? So right now, just I understand what you're saying. We're gonna fund the technology and dishwasher. We're gonna take $30,000 for the entrance, but all of this could change from recommendations from the building committee that's demanded by the state, all right? So on one hand, we got a safety committee, but it may be in direct conflict with what the real safety point is, all right? We put those poles up. I don't even know who put them up, all right? Joe couldn't get the snow away from the front windows that he could get to, all right? So
That was a problem.
we're gonna work on a set of recommendations from the building construction committee and bring them forward to the council next year. Decide whatever you want about the well. See, that's, John, you may have got the opinion that it was unimportant. In the big picture, it's really unimportant. I mean, but, you know, you need a well. But the wall's falling down, so you may need to do something about that.
Okay, so I don't know that my question was answered.
Well, I gave you a lot of problems, John.
Right, you gave me a lot of problems. Short of the heating system, this year, is that $30,000 acceptable to the school committee or not?
Okay, so if I say it's not acceptable, you're gonna say I can have another 150,000, I don't know what I'm trying to accomplish at this time. No, I mean,
I would
yeah, I want another
Short of
$100,000.
the heating system.
I want another 100,000 to deal with everything Ron's talking about. I mean, I just think you guys have to decide where you're putting your money in capital. We've already gone through the process of presenting the planning, we have the heating, you know.
John, we've applied for up to a $500,000 grant from Department of Ed. Okay, so just, you're asking something that until we see, are we gonna get the money, until the architects build a priority list of how to spend the money, decide what you want about the 30,000, small potatoes, I'm telling you.
Can I,
Go ahead.
correct me if I'm wrong, didn't we allocate money last year for the front entrance and that money was put aside for that front entrance, so that would be 60,000 now that you have for the front entrance?
Right, so this is another, really for a future agenda item for the town council, because whether there was confusion around this or not, when that capital line item was approved, it was for a 5-year lease. for $30,000 per year for about $140,000 expense. So technically, we should be trying to, like I said, we can't apply for a loan. Maybe the town gets one and we can get this front entranceway done sooner rather than later. So that I think was it seems like there was some confusion last year over what that was getting approved. But yes, it's up, this will be $60,000 toward that entryway of about $140,000 after this year, if it goes through.
What do you mean lease? You used the term lease. You leasing an entryway?
No, we're using, so Kelly, what's the term? It's a loan, it's a loan.
It's a loan.
Whatever reason it was called a capital lease, I don't know if that's like a industry term or.
It's how, John, it's how part of the new buildings were built at the region.
All right, are there any other questions or comments?
Just,
Mrs. Ryan?
as far as the well goes, having lived my entire life with a well, if you are tapped in with an artesian well to the aquifer, unless something happens to the aquifer, the well itself is not the problem. It could be the pump, most likely the pump. I had, in one house that I had a well, and going down, they didn't put the casing far enough, sand caved in, I had to have a new well. Put in a new well, same thing happened. You don't know. But I can see, and I'm wondering, since it is our emergency hub where we are supposed to go, it would be prudent to have 2 wells. If you could get that through some kind of an emergency hub grant or something like that. Because, I would imagine that most places, certainly in the state, they are on city water. Okay, but we're not. So again, if it's prudent to have a backup. You may just drill it and not do any of the plumbing, just have it there. But, and maybe that's something you could get through a grant for emergency Red Cross buildings, whatever that thing is designated now.
I'm not opposed to $10,000 bumping this line item for a well. I'm concerned that I don't think we can afford $170,000 loan in a year. If we're talking $10,000 one way or the other, that's a fine conversation. $170,000 is a very different animal. So that's what I'm just trying to get down to that. That's why I was asking about reallocating, prioritization. Are you prioritizing your heating system or your entranceway? If you can't have them both and you can only have one.
I think we're saying we want to have both,
I
just
know
like
you
other,
do.
so what are you doing with other departments?
A lot of things the town would like to have.
Right, but you all have made decisions on other departments, right? Your police department wants a new police building, probably, and you're saying, we can't fund that. So what I'm saying is, I don't think we're willing to say we want to prioritize the heating system over the safe entryway. We want to do both, and then it's your decision to put forward, how much you're going to fund toward different departments.
Juliana?
I would just like to speak to prioritization. What the planning board received is not what you're saying now.
It changed since then. It's just like it's a living, breathing.
But you had already gotten the $335,000 quote prior to your prioritization to the planning board, and yet you still prioritized it the most low.
Right.
Because so that's why.
That's why it's here.
Yeah, that's why it got to the town council the way it did.
I understand.
The board took every department's highest priority projects and put it forward.
So John, as a priority, is it more important to have insulation in the roof? Since you're heating the outside for the last 40 or 50 years?
Ron, it's your building to deal with.
No, I know. I can't, you're asking for priorities.
Well, how come it wasn't mentioned?
Between 2 things. Okay, you're asking, you have $60,000, if you get this, you have $60,000 on hand for an
We'll do
entrance.
whatever we have to do, John, is the answer to your question. Whatever money you give us, we're gonna use it in an appropriate way we can. Does that answer your question?
No, because Kathleen is asking us to put aside money for a heating system, because she's saying that is a priority. And my question is if we give you this 30 and you have 30 on hand that was supposed to be for the entrance, if your new priority is the heating system, why wouldn't you put that 60,000 towards the heating system, make that the first priority, and then the entrance the
Because
second?
I answered your question, we're applying to get up to 500,000 for the state, which will change the priorities, right?
I think the heating system has got to be a priority. Obviously, if it's 55 degrees in a classroom in winter, that's a major issue. If we put aside $30,000 a year towards it, it'll take us over. So, an extra 10 or 15 to go towards the heating system isn't gonna solve the problem, but
Unless they reallocate that other 30 they already have, and now we're putting an extra 30 here, now you've got 30 in hand, 30 here, another 30, they've got $100,000. But if you give them that and they put that 60,000 of it towards the entrance, then we didn't fund the heating system. So what I'm looking for is some sort of commitment. If we boost this up to 60,000, can we say that that's 90,000 towards the heating system this year? Or are they gonna take it, spend it on the entrance, and next year they'll come back and ask for 335? That's what I'm trying to get to. Chief?
Yeah, just in reference to the secure entrance, I think it's 3 years now. 3 years that the school has identified, and the safety committee has identified that it is not a secure entrance. They did increase one level of security that you have to be buzzed in to the school. Once you're buzzed in, you have free access to the entire school. And again, God forbid, if it happens, again, hope it never happens, but from a public safety standpoint, I don't want to put any level on the safety of the children and the staff in that school. If it happens tomorrow, again, hopefully it never does, but I don't want it to be a point, well, we talked about it for 3 years.
Are there federal funds available since Sandy Hook that you can apply for a grant and apply for it? I seem to recall that there is some money available in security for that type of front entrance. I mean, I know West Warwick did all their buildings over, and West Warwick doesn't have money. So I
West
don't-
Warwick also, those kind of schools are much more eligible for these kind of funds than Foster. I know that when they're, putting money.
How is Foster less
Well,
available than Sandy Hook? I
no,
mean,
what I'm saying is
that was
usually.
a perfect example of how they come out to, so, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think some of the things here that are hard to understand about how we are not able to prioritize things. I mean, we have this housing aid application that goes in that is incredibly involved. Architects are making the plan. They're prioritizing and reprioritizing based on what engineers come in and say is wrong with the building. So some of this information, we're making this proposal to you in whatever it is, November. Aronian is in there at a later date coming in with engineers and telling us, well, you need to do this repair on your heating system, and they're gonna find all these other problems when they go in there because these different things aren't to code. So I think we try to prioritize before with the timing of when you're doing your budgets, but it doesn't always flow that way, and things have changed since that proposal to planning. I mean, things have changed since our stage 2 application.
Certainly I support the school, certainly I want to see it secure. My grandson goes there, certainly I want to see it secure. I'm just trying to wrap my head around the fact that you said $140,000 for a secure entrance and $335,000 for a new heating system. That's $500,000 over essentially a 2-year period. So is that doable in the town budget? It's not.
Well, this
It's
is why
just
we're-
not. So it's somehow there has to be some other source of funding, some grants or use of rainy day fund, but we don't have that in the capital budget.
John, I've told you twice. Now, I'm gonna try this one more time. Just one more time, I'm gonna try this. We are applying for about 500,000.
When will that be decided?
June 1st, I think.
Right, and we are probably, okay, in the pipeline for that. But until we have it, you're asking us to solve a problem that we can't solve until we have that commitment. So make up your mind, we're gonna give Kathleen $30,000 for the entrance and another something for the well, or you're not. The rest of this, the questions can't be answered. Now, did you hear that? Because Kathleen has answered you, I think 4 times now. So you seem not to be able to grasp it. Which part?
And I think too, the part too we discussed was that we are trying to set up a capital reserve on our end, so I think we're thinking that we're all gonna be contributing to this, it's just that it's an enormous amount of money, and we would have liked to have seen some more go toward it, but we're not. At our meeting we had as a school committee discuss this capital presentation, we didn't want to deprioritize that entryway.
Okay. Kelly?
The only way I can see that you could actually apply more funds to it would be if you did it through the rainy day fund at the financial town meeting. Your capital account is gonna be down to about $268,000 after this year,
What's in
which
the
is
rainy
the
day fund?
all-time low amount in that.
How much is in the rainy day fund? 960,000?
As of last year, and it'll be higher this year, the end of the budget.
Is it a legitimate statement to say that the Payne School heating system may fail soon, and therefore it's a rainy day and request that money?
I believe the people at the financial town meeting can allocate that money as they see fit, regardless of whether or not you say that it's an emergency. You'd have to ask the solicitor about that.
I'm gonna suggest you don't do that, okay? Because if you go to the rainy day fund in May, why would the state say, oh, these people don't have any money, and give you $500,000 in June?
You would do
Or
it
you
for
can
the
always
payment.
call a special
Okay.
financial meeting.
You would do it for
That
the
makes sense.
60%.
We're not gonna do it, we're not
Moving
gonna ask
on.
for, we're not gonna amend, well, unless someone else makes.
You
a
would only
motion.
do it for
I
the
will make a
60%
motion
if
to
you were to
change
do
this.
something like that.
If the system fails and you don't get the grant, we'll call a special meeting and hit the rainy day fund. If the system doesn't fail, then it's fine the way it is.
Right, so to cut a long story short, basically we don't have.
I don't know that we
money
cut it
for
short, but okay.
Shorter.
Is there anything else on this capital budget? No. Okay, 42, the capital 2%, that's money that we're putting in. The first line is mandated by the charter, it's 2% of the total budget. The second line is the decision of the council to fund additional money, to put additional money into the capital fund to assist it in its, making it more healthy. We were able to do $182,000 and still remain under the 4% cap, I believe cap. Puts us right at it, actually, not under it, right at
We
it.
balanced it with that amount. In fact, so much so that if I were to reduce the $4,000 in the recycling amount for the
For the recycling.
0.025 cents it might cost somebody, you might want to put it there to strengthen your capital project fund, to make it easier to fund these projects that you're talking about next year and the year after. I mean, you're gonna be at 3.98%, what's the difference if you're a 4?
Any questions or comments on that? Page 16, Department 50 is Payne School. Council made no changes to this. This is just what the school committee requested. Are there any questions or comments? Mrs. Swanson?
This is just a question about how it shows here, so I just missed before, it says 11,000 increase, 11,000 decrease, what is that? What does that mean? I know it was at the FELP funding that got put into the budget.
It was what was funded in the financial town meeting.
So just, why does it show it adding and then subtracting?
I'm not subtracting, it's a decrease from the funding.
It was added as a separate line item.
They're not funding it?
It's a,
I'm just wondering if that's in there.
it's on their other, I could change it to financial town meeting, which I probably will do.
So
I'll
we're
change the
getting,
description to financial town meeting addition, which is what I've done for every other time, that we add something the previous year in financial town meeting. So last year, what was actually presented was less by $11,000. They
Okay.
budgeted for an additional $11,000.
and so it's level to that amount.
So it's level in total, yes.
Thanks.
The only thing I'll do is change it from other to financial town meeting, we can do.
Any other questions, comments on Payne School? Okay, Department 51, Foster Gloucester Regional, has already been approved at the regional financial town meeting, so that has been set in stone. And the town will be using some money from the student population change to offset some of those costs because we had a student population change this year. So we have some set aside funds specifically for that.
Mr. Lewis,
Yes, sir.
could I address something in regard to that?
Yes, you can.
There's gonna be a proposal coming forward that the Foster, in the future, and I'm just making you all aware, the Foster Gloucester Regional School will be its own taxing authority, okay? That suggestion operates in direct conflict with saving people money, because you're now gonna add a whole taxing and collecting service to the region that is now handled by the towns. All right, so I'm always for regionalization, police departments, anything we can, schools. And when this proposal does come forward, I would hope that the people on this council would not support that, since that will cost the taxpayers extra to run the regional school system. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions on the school? Okay. Final page is expenditures and revenues, and those have all been calculated by the treasurer based on history, based upon any grants or any state funds that have been committed. And essentially offsets what we have to raise in taxes. Are there any questions on the revenue page? Okay, hearing none. That completes every department. Are there any last comments or questions? Hearing none. I will close the public hearing on the budget and entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved. Second, all those in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for your comments. Sure, thank
I think you got a raccoon in this wall.
I didn't know how to shut it off.
I should have closed it down. There's something scratching in the wall.
Carol.